Hi, welcome to another episode of ASAP Conversations. And today we have with us two of our alumni from our youth institutes, youth advocacy institutes, Arzoo and Garima. And I would just request them to introduce themselves. So, Arzoo, maybe we can start with you. And if you can just tell us who you are and what you do. And then Garima.
Hi everyone, I'm Arzoo Garima and I work in a youth-led and feminist organization, the YP Foundation, and I basically work on providing comprehensive sexuality education to youth of Delhi, UP and Bihar.
Thank you, Arzoo. Garima, if you can.
Hi people, my name is Garima. My pronouns are she and her, and I'm pursuing a master's in gender studies from Ambedkar University, Delhi.
What was the situation even before the pandemic hit us? Like, because we know that the pandemic has caused certain things to amplify, but the situation before the pandemic was also not the best, which is why people were advocating for different changes, shifts, and all of that. So, if you can just tell us a bit about, what were the issues that young people were facing in general in India, and and then I'll ask the same question to Garima to follow up. So, Arzu, if you can tell us a bit about the pre-pandemic situation that young people faced.
Yeah. So before the pandemic phase started, India was facing a 45-year-old unemployment phase where so many young people could not get jobs, or they were getting the jobs were getting highly cut. They were getting highly cut salaries. So these were the issues, major issues among young people. Uncertainties of getting a job were there before the pandemic as well, and a downfall of our economy as well. And also, like in if we are talking about Delhi's context, we could see that like educational institutes like JNU and Jamia, they students they were protesting against NRC and CAA, and also there have been retaliation by police or by other people outsiders, goons, into the educational institutions. So they have hampered the studies of students, and also they have caused a kind of trauma, a certain kind of trauma and fear against the government, and what kind of steps have been taken, like in protecting in providing correct and important education to students. And in terms of, if we talk about SRHR, so it has always been neglected, and the issue which is like least talked about even today because of the stigma related attached to it. So young people, they don't have adequate knowledge about SRHR, and like if even one tries to tell them, there are various stakeholders in terms of their parents, teachers, or elder people who take care of them, who prevent them from accessing such knowledge. So in my mind, these were the issues.
And then with these, the Delhi pogrom that happened, and the protests that were happening, many women specifically were sexually abused, and because all that took a communal angle. There was a communal angle attached to it. Never was this side brought out. Like earlier, like 2-3 days ago, I was reading the report that came out of Jamia, and that report has horrendous accounts of female students saying that how they were sexually abused, they were groped, but no one talks about it. And why do we think that like doing a sexual violation is the biggest thing that you can do to a woman? That also has to be in the mindset of the people who are doing it, right? So SRHR, like if we talk about comprehensive sexuality education, that teaches you that there are these are not the ways to go ahead, and it makes you keep in check your emotions. But because we do not have it, then like that is the reason all this is happening, like one of the major reasons. So I think that was what it was coming into my mind.
Yeah. Thanks, Garima. So, just for our audiences who might have tuned in and still not aware about the CAA and the NRC, these were Citizenship Amendment Acts and the National Registry of Citizens that the government was proposing. And thankfully, because of the pandemic, so every situation has its pros and cons. So pandemic has its pros and cons as well. The pro was that the NRC was stopped, because it was, even the UN has condemned it at how communal it was as a law. So of course it goes against the spirit of the constitution, so Indian constitution. So something to definitely think about. And thank you for bringing this up. And Arzoo, because you've been like a sex educator with young people through your work. So I'm also wondering, like, in a country like India, how difficult is it to talk about sex education and, talk about comprehensive sexuality, all of that, and also where a lot of our language, lot of our terminology, even in progressive circles, continue to remain binary and heteronormative. So where is the space for queer people? And or before we came to this situation. And the third question is, we are still a very, very, what in sociological terms, endogamic society. So we still continue practicing or encouraging, relationships within the community, within the, say, certain community in class and caste groups, which overlap in Indian scenario. So in such a scenario also, what are your thoughts? Where do young people stand? Because young people even today, by the majority of them cannot make decisions about their own sexuality and reproductive rights, and even like choosing a life partner. So Arzoo, if you could tell us a bit about that through your experience, and then Garima, I'll ask you the same set of questions.
Yeah. So thank you for your question, Nandini. So like in terms of talking about providing comprehensive sexuality education, or even providing sexuality education, there is a lot of stigma attached to it among the community. Even if we go within the communities and talk to young people about it, they say, "Aap gandi gandi baatein bata rahe ho. Like, what are you talking about? This is not what we are taught." And so we explain them that like, this is not just about sex. Like, the act of sex, it's about everything. It encompasses everything, like about your so about gender, about violence, and about your own personality, about different beauty standards, body standards. Also, all these things, they are included in this comprehensive sexuality education. But people usually don't regard it as like as an important aspect of their life. The consequences are that people, they don't usually know what is happening inside their bodies. Like girls, people who menstruate, when they start menstruating, so they don't know, they actually don't know the reason behind menstruating. At times people think that this is because of a disease, or because भगवान का दिया हुआ कुछ problem आ गया है हमारी bodies में. So all these kind of notions, they start coming up within them, and they don't find answers because parents can't talk to them. They don't have the parents and teachers, they at times they don't have vocabulary for it. Even teachers, they skip these chapters on biology, basic biology of the body. And so they resort to like what their peers have said, word of mouth, or even they resort to internet. At times internet is also full of misinformation. Coming to your second question about talking about queer and trans community. So because of the terms which we use for queer and trans people, like third gender, or we confuse between hijra and all these communities, all these terms. Children also, they have been brought up with the notion that they use it as an abusive language.
We do not know how to talk about ourselves. So it's very it's shame provoking, and for even for people like my age. So I was also a comprehensive sexuality educator at YP. Last year I did that, and the book, though I have been going to trainings and workshops and talking to people, but the audience here was different. We had to talk to them in Hindi. And then when you same thing, when you have to talk in Hindi, when you have to name your body parts in Hindi, when you have to say yoni instead of a vagina, that is when it hits you that, oh, there is an inherent problem. I think there has to be a systemic change. And I genuinely hope that the pandemic brings one.
So we kind of sort of get a glimpse of the situation before the pandemic, and now my question to you, and I'll go alphabetically. I'll ask Arzoo first and then you. How has the pandemic affected young people, like especially with the lockdown? And India has one of the most intense lockdowns with a lot of authoritarianism, lot of policing, and yet like there are many people who were stuck, could not go back home. So it has also affected differently to different people, different segments of people. So there's a whole, the segment of people that's happy staying at home because they have a home, and then there's a whole segment of people that don't have homes and have to walk back miles and miles to their villages, and they couldn't make that journey back. So we live in that very, very skewed society, and we live in a very difficult moment right now. How has it affected young people, cutting across all, class, gender, sexuality, especially in relation to SRHR and abortion rights? Because obviously that's what we sort of as a ASAP understand the best, and we know how to articulate the best. So if you could just tell us a bit about, take us give us a bit of that picture, focusing on this whole SRHR abortion rights issue and young people, and how the pandemic has affected them in that sense. So Arzoo, if I can ask you to start with.
Yeah. So Nandini, as you said earlier, this pandemic has affected differently among urban people, urban classes and rural classes. So like urban classes people, what I have seen in my circle and around, people are quite privileged to stay at homes and to have to have a safe space, what they call as a family, and then to be able to survive their days. And in rural setup, this has been quite different, because in rural setup, what I have seen and what I have observed from the focus group discussions which I have had, that people there are not enough spaces at their homes. So lack of mobility and lack of privacy is one thing which have been like a bigger issue for them. And also because they are living with their families in so close compounds, at times there are girls who wanted to work and who were working before the pandemic set in. So they reported that the talks of their marriages, of them getting married or like just settling down, have started burgeoning up. And earlier, which how they used to like shut their parents up, like they, or even they had coping mechanisms of going out and preventing such talks. Now they don't have any escape for these talks. And also what I have seen, that there has been increase in domestic violence at home with young people as well. So this is quite personal, which I know, some people which I know. And in terms of SRHR services, so menstruation in rural areas, this has been a bigger problem, because there are girls who used to like go and buy sanitary napkins by themselves. But now the lockdown has stuck in, so only one person is allowed to go out and buy products. So it's usually the male, because now the markets are far and no vehicles are running in some areas. So they are finding they are having problems in like maintaining their hygiene during menstruation. And some of them reported they have resorted to cloth because of like lack of communication with their male family member about their menstrual hygiene requirements. And also what I have read in news, and what I have seen through what I did through webinars, I got to know that earlier a condoms biggest manufacturing company in Kuala Lumpur, it stopped manufacturing condoms. So like contraceptives were also a major issue. We also got a demand for contraceptives and eye pills in some areas of Bihar. So like there are demands of contraception, but because of the rural setup or because of lack of like medicines being transported, these demands have not been met. And also in terms of mental health as well, young people are facing a lot of issues because in Delhi only, I got to know that mental health medicines, they are not being available in the medicine in the medical stores. So people who have like severe mental health problems or anxiety, depression, insomnia, they are not able to access those medicines, and so the side effects have started burgeoning up because of all this. And so like this is one of the major issues which is affecting young people. Also like uncertainties about their education, people who are seeking education, and what will happen in the future. It is also causing anxieties, and it is also surfacing stress related issues, and productivity is also like young people, what they have reported, that productivity is quite down these days. So these have been the issues. And in terms of abortion, what like I haven't come across any of such case, but what I have read that uh, although India has made abortion as an essential service during the lockdown phase too, but many people, they are not able to avail abortion services because of lack of transportation. They can't go from their home to the hospital, or anything like that can come up. Or even like abortion is still a stigma in our society, so they can't even say that like I'm a pregnant person and I want to abort the fetus. So these issues, they are basically major issues which are coming up. And also one more thing which I want to add, issues related to managing PMS and PCOD. So menstruators who face all these issues, they are also having like because of lack of medicines, or lack of like communication with their doctors, so they can't handle their issues with PMS and PCOD. And at times seeking online therapy is also not a good option for them. So yeah.
Thank you, Arzoo. So before I ask Garima to add and to share her thoughts, I'll just like to summarize some of the key points for the audiences. I think Arzoo mentioned some very important points here. That is the lack of privacy for young people, which was anyway an issue in Indian homes. But still, before the pandemic, they had something or the other, an excuse they could make up, a tuition class, a college, or something, and go to meet their friends, create their own safe spaces outside the home, because it's a myth that the home is the safe space. There has been studies, including a Government of India study many years ago, which clearly showed that the most dangerous place for women, children, I think people of queer people, is the home. So the most number of times a person can be attacked is from someone who's known to them, and stranger danger is a myth. So I think those are some very important points that you brought out, Arzoo, and I think those are things for our audiences to sort of take away. And the mobility issue also. So again, we know that in India, young women are very strictly monitored and not allowed to sort of explore, go out of the house. They have to have a reason to go out of the house, and now there is no reason. So how do they do that? And all the menstrual hygiene things that you said, that is complicated. But I think what is like even more, it's going to be something that is going to be a challenge for us in the days to come, is the lack of contraception, because which means there will be sex, consensual and non-consensual sex of all kinds, and there will be unintended pregnancies. And because of, again, the difficulties of accessing abortion is legal in India, but it is highly stigmatized. There is a high likelihood that young people will end up with having keeping pregnancies or facing greater violence due to them. So there is a multiple level of issues that the pandemic has kind of opened up, amplified, aggravated. And these are some very important things to keep in mind. I think young people are facing some of the most challenging times. And also, yes, the educational institutions have closed up, exams have postponed. There is now no fixed date when people will graduate or pass out. And what will happen after that? Jobs, because the global economy is going to get affected because of the pandemic. So these are some of the very important key points. Thank you, Arzoo, for mentioning all of these. And so I'll ask Garima to just add and share her opinions on this.
Yeah, I would just like to, some of the points that I would just want to like clarify here. As Arzoo said, home as a safe space, definitely not. I am a proof. No. Okay. privacy, there was no privacy earlier. As you said that, now that thing, my coping mechanism is escape. Okay. And now that has gone. So where does that leave me, right? That leads me to mental health problems. And not having a one-to-one session with my therapist is another problem. I cannot, it's, for some people it's not even feasible to have a phone session. I'm privileged in that case. Menstruation, as we said, there was this thing that, list of essential items, the first list of essential items that came up, it did not have sanitary napkins in it. So, but it had condoms. So that there it goes, that how, we are also looking at female reproductive females' reproductive capability as something to be applauded upon, but we are not looking at their hygiene. We are not looking after their hygiene. So that is something to be taken into account. If somebody wants to go for a vasectomy, I am not sure how is it pronounced. Vasectomy, yes, or the female counter for that is like really troublesome for me. So yeah, if people want to go for that, or an insertion of an IUD, these were not considered these were considered taboo topics back then, before the pandemic. Now people are like, why do you want it? Like they're like just neglecting those procedures, because they're like, we should focus on the larger issues. And for young people it becomes all the more of a responsibility, because of the thought system that we have, that young people are the future of our country. Young people are the ones who will lead us forward. But how do we lead you forward if you're giving us such conditions? There is nothing, absolutely nothing we can do. So yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much. This reminds me of a quote that I really like. That it's, I think, a Native American quote. I'm not very sure, but it says that you don't inherit the earth from your ancestors, but you borrow it from your children. So I really feel that, when you summed it up, that what we are leaving behind is in dire state. So we don't know how can the young people salvage this? How can we go to somewhere better? But let's just keep the hopes going on there. And as far as family planning, and again, Garima, thank you for bringing those points. Like, if the government has actually issued a directive saying that no family planning to be provided which are invasive. So all the surgical ones and IUCD that you are anyway not going to be given out. So, at this point of time. So there is no family, there is only over the counter. So there'll be condoms and pills and all that available still, but there is no the long term and the most sort of, I think, dependable methods are not available. So it is very interesting, because coupled with condom shortages, coupled with difficulty in accessing abortions, we don't know what's going to happen with, in terms of unintended pregnancies and preventing them, or afterwards, what is the way out. That what is it, what what could we say is the learning from this moment, the pandemic. And this is not the first pandemic, this won't be the last pandemic. The pandemic has hit us so badly because we were not prepared, our systems were not prepared. So what is it that how can we prepare ourselves, how can we prepare our systems? So what are the big demands to make, what are the big questions to ask, so that moving forward we don't go back to the old system, the broken system, but we build a new system which is a much more just and inclusive system. So I'm coming to both of you here from a place of hope, because I hope that the earth that we have borrowed from our children is not completely destroyed, and there is still ways that we can save it. So I'll begin with Arzoo. What do you think we can do, or we can ask? How can we? Yeah.
So, being a biology student, what I think what is necessary as of now, like to give much more funding to healthcare sector. But like our public healthcare system is like it can fall apart anytime. So that's why our country, it has to undergo this big nationwide lockdown to
Mm.
prevent all of this, because otherwise we would have collapsed totally. Whatever is this, the world was not prepared for it. We were preparing for wars, nuclear wars, or for other kind of wars, economic wars, but we were not prepared for a pandemic at this. So yeah.
Thank you so much. India is spending something around 1 point some percentage of the total GDP on health. So one of the lowest expenditures in the world. And our health systems, public health systems has been in dire situations even before COVID-19 hit us. And I completely agree. And thank you for bringing that point up so well. That we need to invest in our public health systems, because as taxpayers, all of us are paying tax, direct, indirect. We're all investing in the country, and the country deserves a few things. And health is one of the few of the basic things that every citizen, every person in India deserves to have. There was a meme a few days ago which summed it up, what you just said, that we were prepared for nuclear wars, but we were not prepared with enough ICUs and ventilators.
Right.
So that's what 2020 will be remembered for. So, so we need to re-look at our priorities and reprioritize some of the most basic human rights things, and public health is definitely one of them. And we cannot prioritize or make a hierarchy of public health issues as well. So getting access to family planning or abortion rights is as important for some as any other health issue. So thank you so much for bringing that up. Garima, if you can add as well.
You know how this pandemic has come to recognize when, you know, disabled people and people with mobility problems say that, you know, we cannot go to work, we can work from home. Employers almost say that, you know, no, that is not a possibility. But now, like, half of the economy is working from home. So that is something to be looked at, that, you know, there are solutions that definitely one size does not fit all. You know, that is the thing, that everybody will have different solutions as to what their own demands are. I can only speak from my perspective, because I right now have food in my stomach, and I have, like, supposedly a roof over my head, and everything is sorted. But the people who are not in my place will have different demands. We need to ask people what their demands are, and the government should be willing to listen.
Thank you so much, Garima. I think you also brought in two very important points. That is, one is systemic changes are needed, and one size does not fit all. So I think the lot to learn from communities that has faced social distancing already. So communities that were isolated already, queer people, trans people, and people living with disabilities. They've always been left out, and we have practiced social distancing with some of them even before. So how do we learn from those communities and um, overcome this period of time, this difficulty, and move towards that, world, transform that world, and just create a better world? And I think there is so much to learn from there. And thank you so much. It has been great talking to both of you and get the perspective from a younger population, young people. And I think there is a lot that the country needs to step up to live up to the expectations of the young people, and do them, do the correct thing for them, so that they have something to look forward to. We'll end the session, and bye to both of you. We'll keep catching up.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Garima.